Good afternoon. This is the October 18, 2022 meeting of the Harbor Management Commission. I'm Kim Taylor. I'm here at the Town Hall second floor conference room with Bill Perugini, the Harbor Master Brian LeClaire, our mooring contractor Jeff Engborg. On the phone are Commissioner Sam Cargill, Doug Metchik, Jeff Warren. Jeff Stedman has just entered the room, and we unfortunately will not have Betty with us this evening. She's under the weather. Pat Carroll is also on the call. We have a flag, so let's pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Unfortunately, Betty's office has moved, and it's resulted in a tremendous amount of time, effort, energy, and upheaval. So we do not have the September minutes to approve for this meeting. We will take that up at our November meeting. My report, our mooring contractor, Jeff Engborg, responded to the request that we made of him in the last meeting to estimate how much the mooring tackle, anchors, pendants, buoys, and miscellaneous hardware in the harbor was worth. He broke it down beautifully, but the bottom line number with parts and labor is that that would take about $153,266 to replace all of that mooring tackle. So given the conversations that we've been having around spending money from our 102 account, I think it's clear, and I think we all agree, that $153,266 is not to be touched for any reason whatsoever. We can discuss that more under the lower wharf part of our meeting and discussion. On September 29th, Jeff and I and Betty was instrumental in organizing this meeting, met with John Cotell, the Assistant Director of Public Works, Terry Brown, who is the grants coordinator for the town of Fairfield, and Bill Hurley, the town engineer. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss what the process would be to apply for a SHIP grant from the Connecticut Port Authority. The position of grants coordinator is relatively new, so we were concerned, and Betty was concerned, that we should know that there is someone who manages grants for the town, and that we should meet with her, and so that we could better understand what would be required of us if we were to move ahead with applying for an additional SHIP grant to do the work on the lower wharf. As a result of that meeting, and I'll just allude to this briefly, again, we can discuss this more under the lower wharf heading of the agenda, but it was the consensus of the town employees that we, the Harbor Commission, would have to contribute some amount of money, probably they thought half the 20% cost share of any grant that we got from the Harbor Management Commission. And that was, those folks that we met with are experienced in seeking grants and dealing with other town bodies, so that was only their opinion, but it seems to me that it was a very well reasoned and thought out opinion. We can discuss that more. And then on the 29th of September, I emailed the signature page to RACE so that they could begin to do the work that's necessary to get the permission from DEEP to begin to do the work at any of the work that we have been discussing at the lower wharf. What's clear is that unless we have the permit from DEEP or permission from DEEP, we can't even apply for a Connecticut Port Authority grant. So, and we, at our September meeting, voted to go ahead and proceed with authorizing Race to do that. So that was the purpose of the September 29 email, the signature page. Are there any questions from anyone on the phone here? Okay. Moving right along, Harbor Master LeClaire.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just a report on activities since the last meeting last month. As most of you know, Pequot Yacht Club hosted the J109 Nationals last week into last weekend, and it was very successful, safe, and they did a great job. Everything worked out just fine with that. We assisted one boat that became disabled because it got tangled up in a fishing line at the lower wharf. They were able to get it off their prop and solve that problem. I then spoke with the fishermen, reminded them about fishing in lines and vessels. We helped an Ideal 18 untangle itself from one of the mooring lines that it crossed inadvertently. Hurricane Ian came several weeks ago. As you know, we sent emails to all the Pequot and town vessels and docked vessels, warning them about the conditions that were expected that weekend per the forecast, just to check their lines and loose gear. We went out there and re-secured a couple of vessels on moorings that were not tied up properly or securely enough by boosting their mooring lines, so we didn't have any issues with any boats coming loose. They were predicting 40-plus knot gusts, and we didn't want any problems. A speeding dinghy was reported yesterday. We notified the owner, and that's been resolved. 2 weeks ago at the Harvest Moon astronomical low tide, I went out there and took soundings all the way from Green 9, which is past the the Geological Service buoys, all the way in, zigzagging the harbor for an hour plus, dropping lines, just checking the depths. Found a couple of shallow spots, but they were both close. One was at 9. If you were within a few feet, I was getting 5-foot readings. The same I was getting a couple of feet away from the old pier at the lower wharf. But once you moved more towards the center of the channel, everything was fine. I know there are issues further out that Mr. Stedman will talk about with boats and complaints received. I received 2 complaints about boats bumping going out the channel as well at low tide. So it's something we have to keep an eye on. It's helpful we have the white buoys. They were placed where they were this year, the speed buoys, because as you know, the white buoys are past the last mark on the jetty. So they really show you how to center your boat coming in. And if you don't follow those, you're easily going to run aground, particularly with a sailboat, because the channel is not as wide as it appears. So they're helpful. And we're going to think in the off-season about maybe adding a directional sign a little further in to help the vessels, particularly those visiting, center themselves on the channel when they come in. Spent last weekend at the Annapolis North American In-Water Sailboat Show. Met a lot of different vendors. Looked at some nice Harbor Master boats and realized that's wow, boats have gotten expensive. Got a price on a motor for mine, which is good. But I did speak to the Coast Guard, and I'm going to be hosting a flare day early in the season next spring. Not only just getting rid of flares, but using flares as well. Getting a chance to, most of us have never, thank goodness, shot a flare gun or popped open a handheld flare. So we're going to have the opportunity to do that. Coast Guard, we discussed how to get rid of them, what to do, who I'll notify ahead of time, and it'll be a nice event to have. At the same time, I spoke to some vendors who want to participate. One vendor is, they've come out with a new type of self-inflating or manual inflating PFD that actually looks like a light jacket, a short-sleeve jacket you can put on, not even as bulky as the suspenders we're used to. They're going to donate one for it for us to raffle off for those that come there. So they just want to display their equipment, display the little pouches for kayakers and boaters, try to encourage folks to get the new technology of safety gear. And we'll be reaching out to more vendors to try to get them to come as well with the new buoys that are the new distress devices that are battery operated, both to set signals, both to put on your PFD, or just to flash in the water. So we'll be doing that probably in May or June. I'll be setting that up as the spring comes around, and that could be a nice event for us.
Great idea.
Yeah, I'd love to promote that through the Coast Guard from the Public Affairs Office, and we would love to do that to kick off, safe boating season, I think, which is in early May.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That's
Coordinate with you and open it to the whole town. Invite the South Benson and the whole community to come.
Yeah.
Because the more people, the better.
Fantastic.
And we'll decide where we do it, whether we want to do it at Lower Wharf, whether we have the trajectory to shoot, or whether we want to do it from the beach.
Can you elaborate on that? I mean, what a fantastic idea.
So, we all, at least I do, I call them suspenders. That was the original SOS penders. Well, you wore them on my boat, or you saw them on my boat.
Yep.
So now they have something for paddle boarders. It's a little fanny pouch that's the size of maybe 8 by 6 perhaps, and a couple of inches thick. You put on your waist. And if you're wearing that, it's manually inflated, or it could be automatic, but typically on a paddle board you'd want it manual in case it goes for a swim. Once you pull it, a life jacket pops out of it, a self-inflating jacket, which you can then put on your neck as well. The new item that this company has come up with, I believe it's a French company. It looks like a lightweight jacket with short sleeves, and it did not look like a PFD at all. It's like a stylish kind of a Springer fall jacket you might wear.
Like a windbreaker?
Yeah, not a windbreaker, but synthetic material though, but light like that. Okay. Something that you may wear this time of year on the boat or in the summer if you want to keep the sun off of you. But it turns out it's a self-inflating PFD. Because I noticed it, the only reason you know is he had the pull tie hanging out of the pocket so you could see it. That made me go over and have a whole conversation. New technology, lighter, something that more people would wear if they don't like the suspender style, because they think that's too big or too hot.
But it is bulky.
It's bulky. So this is something new, and if you pull it or if it goes off automatically, it will pop up, and it's got a hood, and you stick your head through it, and it's ready to go. We had one boater use this year. He actually sent me an email that he fell off his boat early in the season. He was alone, a gentleman in his 60s, was on the boat working and fell off and sent me a note. Well, I always know you're talking about wearing life jackets if you're alone in particular, and it worked. Number one, I fell off. First time ever, and it's self-inflated, and I couldn't get back on the boat. So, it's a reason we do that. You just swim across the channel or flag someone for help.
Are there many brands, or is it just like...
This is the first one I've seen like that. This is something new, and I bet you once it's out, there'll be more.
Yeah, what a fantastic idea.
It's just a new option. It's an option for people who want to do something different.
Right.
We'll try to get the other vendors there, too. Maybe bring in someone like a West to bring some of their products.
Yeah.
Just to show people what technology is there, so they should... And then what has to be replaced. You can't just keep these for 20 years or 10 years. It's that little pressurized cartridge.
Right.
You got to check the data on that and check the color on it to make sure it works. Now, you guys know that from the club. I'm sure you're always checking those to make sure that they're going to work when you need them to.
Any idea what the price point is?
That I don't remember. I didn't. That's really my bag of materials I got from all the different folks.
Yeah.
The different products they have.
What a great idea.
Great idea.
I thought it'd be fun. And the Coast Guard encouraged it when I spoke to them because they don't do it.
Sure.
They have the resources to do it. And they said, of course, you can shoot flares off. Just let us know ahead of time.
Yeah.
And, it'd be a great experience for a lot of people, they said. And they said, we'll find out that most of them aren't going to work. They said, you'd be surprised how many of us carry flares that have expired thinking they're backups. You're going to pieces half of them, you probably won't even get to fire.
Interesting.
Because they're going to be too waterlogged.
Yeah, interesting.
It'll be good.
Yeah, great idea.
So for those of you on the phone, any questions for the Harbor Master?
No questions here.
Okay, great. Moving on to Lower Wharf. So Jeff and I met with, as I mentioned, with the town engineer, the assistant public works manager, and the grant coordinator, and it was their opinion that if we applied for money from the Connecticut Port Authority, that we would be responsible for a significant amount of the cost share, and that it would be in order to get the town to contribute some portion of the cost share, that we would have to meet with RTM, Board of Finance, First Select Woman, and explain the project, explain that we are applying for a grant, and ask them to contribute. The Connecticut Port Authority grants are not any longer that they write a check and that you put that in the bank and then spend it. It's now a reimbursement procedure, so that we would have to spend money and then go to the Connecticut Port Authority and be reimbursed for whatever it was that we spent. Well, we did talk numbers with in the course of that meeting, that we should offer to spend roughly half of the cost share, and ask the town to contribute half of the cost share of the project. And if you recall, the project comes in at around $800,000. So the cost share would be about $130,000, $140,000, depending on how much it actually turned out to be.
The cost share is 20%.
20%.
Yeah, it's 20% of the total project.
Of the total
obtain
project.
this grant.
Right. So,
A grant for this.
So Jeff and I made the point during the course of this meeting that the money that we would contribute to the cost of the cost share would be coming from our mooring account, and $153,000 and change have already been spoken for in the form of replacement for any emergency replacement for any of the tackle should it all kind of disappear. And we also made the point, and I think it's worth commissioners to think about, is that it seems to me that we still don't know what kinds of expenses we might have to incur in relation to the Army Corps of Engineers dredging project, and that until we have a much better picture of what the Corps is going to do and what might need to be done in conjunction with the Corps or after the Corps has completed their work, that possibility of that money that we might have to spend to actually get the harbor open and dredged really should be our first priority. I'd love to hear from commissioners and what they're thinking about spending mooring fee money to fix the lower wharf.
We also heard yesterday during the Board of Selectmen's meeting on another topic that there were different town departments that were asking for additional funds to be allocated because the cost of projects that they originally envisioned have gone up substantially. That's another consideration, thinking ahead. But we also talked about that we can't do anything here unless we have the approvals to do the work. So that's underway. And I guess we don't have to decide on this right away, but
right.
It's thinking ahead to the next round of these SHIP grants. What do we do?
Commissioners, any thoughts?
We also had talked about the possibility of once we get all the approvals, is perhaps only working on one set of either the north pier or the south pier or the wall, but splitting up the overall project into.
Yes, Madam Chairman, this is Eric Summan. I just joined the call.
Great, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the cost estimate that we, sorry, Jeff.
Jeff, come on up.
The cost estimate that we received from Race Engineering broke the project up into three components. The north pier, which is not functional now, there's no deck on it, and the south pier with the entranceway to it, and then it worked to repair the wall itself. So I guess there would be some cost savings associated with mobilization if all the work was done at one time. But we don't have approvals now that have lapsed to do any of this work.
And we do have the Army Corps of Engineers moving ahead, albeit slowly, with the dredging on the other side of the channel.
Chairwoman, this is Jeff Warren.
Yep.
It was my opinion that the lower wharf is not something that's used by the boat owners, and it doesn't seem reasonable to me to expect the fees from the boat owners to cover major repairs to the harbor, and that wharf is used primarily by the other citizens of Fairfield, and that should be their responsibility to make repairs if they choose to do so.
Well, you're right, Jeff. I mean, it is a town park. And we know from our survey that we have a very, very large percentage of people who enjoy the harbor are not boaters. They are people who come down to the lower wharf to walk, to sit and watch, to picnic, to do view the blessing of the fleet and the parade event that's in June. It's a well-used park.
And I also add that fund is not just restricted for boat owners. It's restricted under the statutes for public improvements in the harbor. It's not limited to boat owners. And I don't know that it is formally a park, Tim, because if that was the case, it would be the responsibility of the Parks and Recreation Commission to manage it. So it has some other type of legal designation. And the commission, it is the commission's responsibility to manage it.
Right, and it's called
for public access.
For public access, and it's called open space. I use the word park loosely, but it is in the deed. It's called open space, and we are obliged to manage it.
And to improve it or maintain it for the public, for access to the harbor.
Harbor Master Leclerc?
Just to throw something out, my observations this summer, and maybe you folks are there at different times than I am. We have the new, I call it the Southern Pier, the new pier, which will always have several fishermen on, it seems, all the time, especially when fishing season kicks in now. You'll get a few at Yee Yacht Yard, perhaps at the docks there or the rock there, and then you'll get maybe two. The most I've seen is probably 4 or 5 on that dock. Are you talking about reconstructing the northern pier? And number 2, is that needed if you're building a whole new pier there, a new fishing pier? Is that something that we...
That's a question to...
That's a question, yeah.
And then, of course, that's also, if we were to remove that, we can never put it back. So there is a benefit to restoring it now because it's a structure that currently exists.
But if you remove it, does that just let fishermen cast right over what used to be the pier obstruction from the bulkhead area? I just want to throw that out there as something,
But I think we need to get the approval, though, since that's part of the agreement we have with the engineering company, get the approvals to replace and repair everything, and then we have to decide what to do.
We go with every step of,
We removed, there was an extended northern section here.
There was.
That the Harbor Commission removed some years ago with the anticipation that we'd be able to put a community sailing dock in that area. But that didn't work out because of the ledge that was...
So originally it looks now like there are 2 piers, but originally there was 1 pier?
There was a connection where you could walk out.
Right, so originally there was one pier.
Yes,
not
the T.
A longer, but it was longer, yeah.
But that's clearly a designated or identified area for public access to the harbor.
Right. Commissioner's thoughts?
I'm mixed. I understand your point and yours as well. I mean, it's under our purview. Again, those who have invested and who, moor their boats, obviously are not utilizing, that area to the extent that the public is, right? I mean, probably very little engagement comparatively, but it is under our purview. It's not under Parks and Rec.
Right. Oh, right. No question. No question. I mean, it's kind of a rock and a hard place. I would simply point out that Perry Green, which has nothing to do with us except that we see it, the town received over $1 million to redo that wall. So, you know, that's federal funds, and I know now, we've heard now that's not gonna be enough to repair Perry Green the way the town would like to do it, and so there's cost overruns on that project as well. But, no, we never had the opportunity to request federal funds to fix any of the Lower Wharf activities. It seems right now that our only source of money to fix the Lower Wharf would be a SHIP grant, and the Connecticut Port Authority has indicated a willingness to provide that money, but the fly in the ointment is that we are responsible for 20% of the cost. And given that it's a reimbursement process as opposed to getting a check in the mail, we would be spending a significant amount of money before we ever saw any reimbursement.
And we know the dangers of that.
Yes. Yes. And we, right across, 40 feet across the way, we have the Army Corps of Engineers coming in to dredge, and we don't know the extent to which we're going to be called on to contribute to any kind of mitigation project, any kind of movement of sand around. And it seems to me that boaters would be far more interested in making sure, at least as a first priority, that they can get in and out of the harbor. So I'm looking for input from commissioners because we need to think about this. This is a big deal, and a lot of money is involved, and setting a priority that will have an impact on how a lot of people use the harbor going forward.
The dredging should be the first priority.
In my opinion, but
I agree.
I'd like to hear from other members of the commission that.
I agree that the dredging should be the first priority. This is Bill Ferragini for the record.
Commissioners, hello?
Yeah, this is Doug on the phone too. I don't know if you can hear me. I also agree that the first priority should be dredging. It's where we report. I think the comment about the public use of the broader town and surrounding area for the Lower Wharf are very interesting. Something worth speaking further with the town about.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, this is Jeff Warren again.
Yep.
I actually don't think that wharf itself really gets that much use. I see a couple of fishermen using it, and that's about it. And they could, if that wharf didn't exist, they could fish just as easily from the land, from the wall. I'm just not sure it's worth all that money to restore that for the very limited use that it gets.
Well, that's a good point, because we probably could, the wall right now it's just a wall and it drops off. But probably in the repair, you could put up a pretty nice looking fence in that concrete and that people would lean on the way they lean on the wharf right now.
Yeah, in fairness, whenever I'm down there are people fishing from that wharf. So I do feel that they perceive value to that. But once again, I feel that dredging should be the priority.
Yes, Kim, this is Eric.
Yep, go ahead, Eric.
Yes, I do agree. The dredging is the priority, but yet also, to get the full scope of understanding, the pros and cons and the ups and downs for maintaining that extra or the other pier. That's probably going to be a separate conversation altogether to deliberate that, because there are, we are talking about the future too. We don't know what that could ever be used for with anything. We don't know yet, but definitely, I think dredging is the priority.
So is anyone aware of any other sources of money that you sell for it, perhaps? I don't think an increase to mooring fees is the fair way to go, really, on that. And I don't know if there's a way to finance this that is equitable, that is
also done with other open space areas or similar properties that the town is an instrument?
Jeff Stedman?
I also think we need to consult with the Sasquatch group before making a decision, because the deed, I believe, just like the Perry Green deed, identifies the Sasquatch group as not the managing entity of this, but having a role in decisions that affect it. Because they and the neighbors provided a substantial amount of funds for the purchase of the property. So it's not just our decision.
Right.
We have to
Right.
consult with Sasquatch.
Sasquatch did provide a lot of money to.
And they're specifically mentioned in the deed, as I recall.
Right. Yes, you're right. How long will it take if the Port Authority opens the door for additional grants? How long does it take between the application and the award generally? Is that?
Well, this year, the applications, I believe, were due at the beginning of July. And the allocation of the money comes from a meeting of the Connecticut Bond Commission, which was to take place on October 28th, which is next Friday. But that meeting has been canceled. So the next meeting of the Bond Commission is at the beginning of December. So that would be July. If you follow the schedule of this year, it would be 5-6 months to get the money. Now, what they were hoping to, I say hoping, the Port Authority was thinking of doing and going before the Bond Commission this time to request an advance of next year's allocation of funds for this grant program, so that they would be able to accept applications sooner rather than wait until next July. So that was one of the reasons we were thought we might have to try to make a decision on this sooner than later, because we may have an opportunity to apply for the grant rather than now instead of next July, but we don't know that yet.
And I guess the other question is, so if we apply for the grant and we're awarded the grant, are we obliged to spend it within a certain period of time?
Well, the previous grants weren't. There wasn't an obligation, because we still have that money from we got the grant now that we have to give back. We got that in 2018.
Right.
Well, those are questions we can ask.
Right. Right.
But I know for this round of grants, the other towns that applied, they had their attest in the application that they had provided the cost. They were able to provide the cost share. So, for example, the Norwich City Council met to authorize the cost share for the project that the city of Norwich applied.
So if we were to apply, we would, before we could submit the application, we would have to have the cost share in the bank.
Or at least a commitment some sort of commitment that we were going to provide it.
Okay. Wow, it's complicated.
Yeah,
quickly.
like everything else.
Commissioners, any other thoughts?
I have a question. What is the estimated cost?
About $800,000, isn't it?
It's like $788,000.
Yeah.
That was
20%
Yeah.
would be responsible.
Yes.
$156,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, who knows how that goes, right? We've
Right.
seen the dangers. Firsthand seen the dangers of that before.
Right. Right. And we don't.
There would still be a cost associated with the removal of those.
Right.
So it's at least $800,000. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that might be close to $1 million.
Right.
And so we were responsible for roughly $160,000, if not $200,000.
Right. And it was the opinion of the officials that we met with that we would not be able to ask the town, other bodies in town for the whole thing. That because we have all the money from the mooring fees in the bank, that they would be eyeing that.
Which makes sense, because the purpose of that fund is to advance
For
projects
harbor
like this.
improvement and management.
Harbor improvements to the public.
Yeah.
So although it's an uneasy pill to swallow, it looks as though that's going to fall upon our shoulders. And even though we don't think it's the responsible thing to do, that those who have that the mooring fee should be responsible for that. It doesn't seem like there's another way to address those repairs. That's how I see it.
No, I think so, and that's why I'm suggesting that, $200,000 is a lot of money, and we've got dredging, that if we don't get that done and we don't make sure that it's done the way it should be done, that the rest of it's irrelevant. So that we need to make the mooring and finishing whatever work, whatever plans deep in the Army Corps come up with, we're going to be part of that, and they're going to have cost overruns too, so we might be asked to contribute.
We might be, yes, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. So, Commissioners, any more thoughts, comments? Harbor Master?
I was going to show you something else before Jeff put that away, but on a different
Okay.
topic.
Commissioners, any more comments about Lower Wharf work and the complications of finding almost $200,000 in order to be the cost share? I mean, we're not putting this to bed. We're only opening and beginning the conversation. Okay, no more thoughts. We will be revisiting this, I'm sure. Sand management, Jeff's been in touch with the Army Corps. So, Jeff, let's get an update.
So we're going to try to have a teleconference or a Zoom conference with the Corps of Engineers. Kim will talk about scheduling that, and then they would like the Harbor Master to participate this time as well. So that may be towards the end of next week or the middle of the first week in November.
Virtual?
Virtual,
yeah.
yes. And so the first thing I might mention is we provided the information on the piping plover habitat, which they appreciated us doing that. And maybe we call the habitat there that's unoccupied marginal habitat, but it appears that's the consensus of the Fish and Wildlife Service. We have to convince Steve, but there's no more that we have to do with that right now. Also, the real estate section of the Corps is looking into pursuing the ownership issues of the determination from their point of view of ownership of the sandbar, or the sand spit, probably more appropriate to talk about. The other thing I might mention is that they took some additional sediment, or maybe they did some additional sediment samples and tests, and they asked us, they asked if we could provide some information on what we think about the priorities of the conditions. You mentioned, Mr. Harbor Master, that you've taken some soundings out here. So now I think we're starting to look at this as there may be two parts of this project, because the Corps.
For those of you on the phone, Jeff has a picture of the entrance to the channel, entrance to the harbor, and shows the outer channel. And what he's asking is, from the day mark in towards the day mark in the day around the day mark, what if we had to have some additional dredging done? What would our priorities be, and what's our experience out there by the day mark that's at the end of the breakwater?
We've been focusing on the sand spit and the use of the Corps' own dredge to do that, which is a hydraulic dredge that's specifically designed to dredge sandy material, and then to place that in an identified site in the near shore up to the south. But the other material is silty in character and is not suitable for being dredged, but with the Corps' dredge. So that requires a different equipment, just as we did back in 2004 and 2005 when there was a contractor that did the whole channel.
Is that more challenging? Is it more costly?
Well, it has a different element to the project because it has to be contracted out. The Corps doesn't have the equipment to do it itself. So what we have been focusing on is our main concern is what to do about that sand spit encroaching across the channel. But now, based on the analysis that they've done, they're asking the question, and they're deciding this among themselves too. do they put this part of it out to bid to get a contractor to do it? How do they handle that? So they're still analyzing this, and we're gonna talk about that when we have the teleconference with them. But you see, the issue is that's the second project, and the contractor with a mechanical dredge, and that has to be put out into the designated Long Island Sound disposal sites, which creates another issue because it has to be tested if it goes into the disposal site much more stringently than the sand had to be tested, which goes in the nearshore area. So one question, we're not expected to answer it right now, is what's our priority here? Do we want to go ahead as quickly as we can and do this project, or do we want to wait until the whole thing can be done at one time with a contractor? So I'm not asking that question now, but it's something that we have to discuss.
Jeff, if we went out to bid, and I know there are issues by the green mark or the green day mark on the rock pile, and you can see there's issues, as you get close to the day mark at the end, you can see right on that drawing, the shallow water. You've got to watch it coming in there. Mm-hmm. You've got to obey the red mark. You have to keep that red mark to your right. If we were to say we wanted the whole thing from, 7 and all the way in, or 5 all the way in, done, would the Army Corps still use their equipment on the sandy portion of it, and it would just be a subcontractor for the rest?
That's something we have to discuss, and whether they put it all out to bid as one contract for a private contractor to do this as well. But this has to be used for beneficial use somehow. It either has to be put on the beach or it goes to the shellfish enhancement area that we talked about.
I mean, is there an advantage? We don't want to lose what we have momentum on. Is there a disadvantage to saying, fine, we clearly want you guys to do the sand, but at the same time, we need to do the channel, and maybe that takes a year more to do?
I think, their question was, how urgent do we find that these channel siltation areas are to do right away? But we're going to have this discussion with them. They say they have more work to do, in terms of analyzing how much silty material it is and what's involved. And if it goes out to bid, it's going to extend the time that we have to deal with this. And it's going to need more money, perhaps. They have the funds that they thought were sufficient to do that part of the project.
I've only taken soundings out to 9, which is the green buoy to the north of the green one on the rock pile. Mm-hmm. I know Mr. Emborg, before the meeting, was commenting on members who have run into issues with deep keel boats coming in, not even at a low tide, by the, I guess it's 7, the one on the rock pile in the middle of the channel getting stuck. So.
Commissioners, I know there are a couple of you with boats that have deep drafts. What is your experience from the rock pile, the day mark on the rock pile, in towards the what we're calling the sand spit, which the Corps is going to dredge?
It was Jeff Warren. I draw 7 feet with my boat, and I've never even come close to touching. So.
Excellent.
This
Sam?
Sam Cargill here.
Yeah.
The same with Jeff. I have yet to.
So Yep. Go ahead, Eric.
There was one instance I was coming in right at that location, and I had to offer assistance to a large keel boat that I couldn't handle, and then almost immediately the Howard Burr came out and had to offload everyone on it and tow them out of there. And it was a pretty big boat, but it was, it's tight. I mean, there's no question. It is tight there if you're not 100% familiar with the tide, the wind, and what you're doing. But, and I have the VHF on at home, and I've heard people this summer just run aground right in that area. So, I mean, it is kind of a dicey situation over there, I think. But that's just my experience.
Mr. Engborg, you want to?
Yeah, there's a problem out there for sure. I do have a copy at the club if anyone is interested of the Army Corps' latest survey, or a late survey. and it shows that area filling in quite a bit. We've had a boat run aground there at,
This is what you're talking about, John?
Just by the rock pile.
I'm talking about right here,
By the rock pile.
right out here, all the way out by here. Actually, it was right in here where you can see the pinch.
Yeah.
And that's near number 7 and number
Yeah.
6, I believe. It was, the boat that ran aground there was 8.5-foot draft, and we had to wait till 20 minutes past low tide for him to float off. Luckily, there wasn't any waves or anything. Kind of shocking, right dab in the middle of the channel.
You should not have that issue.
No, we shouldn't have that issue. We shouldn't have that issue in the middle of the channel.
But the Corps has performed the survey. We have it over there if you want to see it.
So they know.
They know.
They know.
They just, the question is, do we, well, not,
Do we wait?
it's not the formal question yet, but there's
Right.
2 parts of the project, and they require different equipment.
Right.
So how do we sequence them, or wait till they can be done together, and that's what we have to think about.
Right.
Well, the risk we run is it gets narrower and narrower
Correct.
as your sand spit, which is pretty darn narrow at low tide now for 2 big boats
Correct.
coming in. You've got to be so careful. Get along, you have a kayaker and an ideal at the same time.
The issue with putting it out to bid is, and this has, as I said, has to go to Long Island Sound disposal sites. That requires a whole more, another round of
It could take 2
testing.
years for all we know, right?
And we'd have to get capping material?
All right, that's not, I don't think that's known yet as to whether we need capital
So
material.
but there's a possibility.
So we'll have a discussion about this either next week or the week after.
Okay. Commissioners, any additional thoughts?
Far more complex, sophisticated,
Oh, yeah.
right, lots of
Already, and we're still a
additional
year out.
complexities.
We're
Yeah.
still a year out.
That's my take.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
If you grab the other drawing, I want to show everyone something I forgot to mention on this drawing, except those on the phone still have to listen.
And I want to mention one more thing about this one. Brian.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
You want this one?
Yes, when I went out there at low tide, it was actually a half
So,
hour.
commissioners on the phone, we're back at the lower wharf.
I went out there about 20 minutes to a half hour after the very low tide we had 2 weeks ago, and I keep my boat, it's the second from the end on the westernmost portion of Yee Yacht Yard, where if you came straight off the dock onto it and walked straight. So I'm actually a little bit closer to this boat pictured. As soon as I came, if you drew a straight line between the fire boat and the end, as soon as my bow on my little 13-foot whaler came by, the engine got stuck in the mud at that point out.
Wow.
So, and I couldn't get the boat even into that spot with the engine up. There was inches of water. So not only was everything off the ramp, these boats dry, everything, just virtually everyone in the middle was dry as well.
So with this extraordinary low tide, all of the boats at the dinghy dock were on mud.
Yes, except some, I believe, at the far side. And that just lets you know where we're heading.
Yeah.
That was my point.
Yeah.
We have to think about that as we go forward.
Yeah.
But it's not going to get any better there. And I did measure the mud at that point. And, you know, it's up to my waist, basically, if you were to stand in it, to see that that much mud is accumulated in there, which we can't dredge out, but it's coming in.
Wow.
I did old school. I climbed in.
These aerial photos are interesting. This is from 2016, so it wasn't too long after the town excavated the channel. And you can see how this line is sort of straight.
Yeah.
But that's not the same from the aerial views now.
No.
It's
You see it curving even on
It's
that.
starting to curve.
bumps way out.
Yeah.
So it's starting to
Country
curve.
club, on the country club
So,
side.
so
those
that
of you on the
raises
phone.
the issue of continuing to overwash the jetty. And the Corps of Engineers is not, as part of this project, they're not doing anything with respect to the jetty. They're looking at this as a maintenance dredging project. It was interesting that DEEP, when they were here, saying that if this was a private project, not a federal Corps of Engineers project, they would make the applicant do something with the jetty
Make it.
to try to reduce the amount of sand going over the top of it. Now, we keep talking about this as sand management, and it's not really managing the sand anymore. We're trying to get rid of it.
We're trying to get rid of it.
Now, and this is getting back to the Port Authority, which funds engineering and feasibility and evaluation studies, which don't have a cost share. So I asked the manager at the Port Authority if it might be possible to apply for a grant to do an engineering study of this to figure out what we could do. We'd have to do this in coordination with the country club, what we could do to try to reduce the amount of sand going over the jetty. So that's something that's potentially fundable by the Port Authority. We'd have to retain an engineering firm to do that. You know that for many years, the Public Works put snow fencing here to try to block it didn't accumulate any sand. It just showed that it's not wind-blown sand, it's wave wash sand over the top of it.
And was that the purpose of that snow fencing?
We thought there was wind-blown sand coming in, this snow fencing would essentially stop this, it would pile up in front of the fencing, or right behind it actually, to try to block the movement of wind-blown sand, but it didn't.
But so it's more wave-driven?
Yes, and we had Race Engineering look at this, and they did a report for us talking about the wave-washed sand, so how do we deal with this? And when the town, back in 2004, 2005, when the town was also working here at the same time as the dredging contractor, the town excavated it when they were taking sand. They excavated maybe a foot or two on this side of the jetty, and it was within 1 year or a very short time it was filled up, and it was just the ramp over the top of it. So how much would you have to excavate to basically make the jetty function as it's supposed to? And the country club expressed concerns also at the time about any sort of making what do you call it, an area, digging out an area here that would trap the sand, like a trap, because that would change the character of their beach. So that's something to think about with a grant from the Port Authority, which wouldn't have a cost share because it's not a construction grant.
Well, what was the study that Race did that measured, that determined that was wave wash?
They calculated a volume of sand every year I have all that stuff. I should share it with everyone.
Well, I guess my real question is what's the difference between what Race did and what we could hire somebody else? What kind of feasibility study could somebody else do that would be different?
They calculated that the sand was, the volume, but they didn't make a recommendation as to what to do about it. That's what do we do about it? Is it feasible? Some people said to build up the jetty, or is really the way to maintain a jetty is you excavate sand from the updrift side and move it back. And then who does that? And what does that cost over time? But yeah, if we were able to restore the 100-foot wide channel, it's just going to come back in a few years.
But literally fighting the tide.
Yes,
literally.
But which is the normal way?
That's why you dredge.
The way this works, yeah.
But the federal government owns the jetty.
Yes.
So it would be on them,
I would think so.
right?
Yeah, I mean.
Good luck, right? How would we?
Talked about, they're not going to raise it.
Right.
Very little chance. We talked about the process that has to be followed to do that. And since it's a federal project, you'd have to first have an act of Congress to authorize a study to see what the costs and benefits are. And then you'd have to, anyway, that's another thing to think about. That's the sand management part of it.
So in some commissioners, Jeff and I and the harbor master will meet with the Army Corps of Engineers to discuss kind of where they are on the Currituck project, which is the dredging of the bump out at the country club, and also to discuss what they've found and what some of the considerations are or would be to have a contractor come in and dredge further south than the bump out in the channel. And if we can make that meeting happen in the next couple of weeks, we will be reporting back at the November commission meeting on kind of where we are with that. Any other comments or thoughts?
They specifically asked that the harbor master participate too.
Great. That makes good sense. Okay, Mr. Perugini, mooring committee.
Yes, so the mooring committee convened here at Sullivan Hall last Tuesday, October 11th at 5:30 p.m. in the absence of Chairman Hirschler. I led the meeting. The harbor master gave a report similar to the one he gave a short while ago. Fortunately, there was not as much damage as anticipated from the recent storm. He also reviewed the value of the moorings and all the replacement for the tackle in the harbor, which again was roughly $150,000. He did mention that this is a helix year, so we need to be in consideration of that. And also just reiterated what he recently or just reviewed relative to the issue with mud at the dinghy dock. And I think that was about all that we covered in our roughly 30-minute meeting of the mooring committee.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Perugini about the mooring committee meeting? Okay, and you're up again, Bill, Deputy Harbor Master search.
Yeah, so we discussed that during our mooring committee meeting as well. Right before this meeting, I circulated the correspondence that I sent out last month, pending everyone's approval of the recommendations that I communicated relative to the posting. We could submit that. What did come up last week was the importance of only giving the candidates 2 weeks. So we're going to post it for 2 weeks. So if we start it this Friday, we could wrap it up by November 4th, I believe, is 2 weeks from this Friday, and then consider those who've expressed their interest in the Deputy Harbor Master position. We also discussed posting it on our site, the Town of Fairfield site, and a few other locations to generate the largest candidate pool. And so I also corresponded with Betty. As soon as she establishes the link, we could post accordingly.
Great. And you've had a lot of interest, right? Both you and the Harbor Master.
I've heard 2 people have approached me who've heard of it already.
One person contacted me.
Great. So we've got some candidates before we even
I'm watching my back.
Commissioners, any questions?
We got you.
Commissioners, any questions about the Deputy Harbor Master search? Okay. Survey of Lower Wharf repair projects. Sam and Eric, are you going to take a look and begin to put a list together? Any thoughts? Any comments?
Yeah, just as a recap of last conversation about the Lower Wharf and sort of an official site visit, if it was by the town, and engaging the risk management department of the town of Fairfield to review Lower Wharf for, from a loss control perspective, any potential, dangers and or liabilities or things that the town could face or we could be responsible for. There is a new, the former risk manager of the town is no longer with the town, but I was in contact with Peter Ritchie, who is in the Human Resources Department, which, by the way, now has assumed all risk management for the town. It's no longer part of finance. Neither here nor there. At least we have somebody who has responsibility within their department. So I think the goal would be to be working with either their broker or vendor or whoever to have a sort of a risk control assessment down there. And report back to us and obviously to Parks and Recs and any other interested party.
Great. During when Jeff and I met with the town engineer and the deputy public works manager, the question came up about all the electrical boxes down there, and I didn't have an answer to that, and nobody seems to know what they're for or if they're still even live. And so Jeff seemed to recall that they might have been put in place at a time when the Shellfish Commission was going to put downwellers close in.
Well, I think they were there before, but I know that they were active when the Shellfish Commission had their baskets of oysters.
Yeah, where are those boxes exactly?
There are a couple of them.
They had them here. And they were called upwellers, so the water was circulated, and that's why they needed the electricity. They put oyster seed or small juvenile oysters there, and then the idea was that they would grow to a size that would resist predators in the cages, and then they would transplant them elsewhere. But they don't do that anymore.
There's at least one box on the southernmost rectangle with it looks like where you connect shore power and those kind of wires. Some type of distribution center.
Oh, you're talking about the
boxes, the electric boxes.
I was talking about the boxes.
I think they're up in that corner.
Stuff.
Okay, and they're still active? They are still live? They're still powered?
Well, the deputy public works manager wasn't sure, but he said, we're paying for them. Yep, go
during
ahead.
testing of the fleet, they hook up PA system to it. So,
So they are still on.
from what I can recall, I mean, that would be the only way they'd get power to the PA system there.
Yep.
That I would think. I mean, unless they're running it off car batteries, which I highly doubt, but I think it's live, and I do think, yeah, it's set up for shore power for any type of emergency or anything.
Thanks, Eric. Well, the question came up in the meeting whether that should continue to be live and whether we want to continue to have it there. So, but you've got that on your list, Sam.
Yeah, well, obviously, I think it's a town responsibility to have a thorough risk assessment if they would do in any part, like, what they would do at Jennings or Penfield or anywhere for that matter. And, make recommendations as to, what should be done and in terms of mitigating any potential disasters or create liability. So that's my view. It's a risk management problem for the town, and it's something, if they have the resources, they should, this should be part of it. So.
Great.
The other part of, maybe it fits into risk management, but since the town owns this beach now, which is open, which is available for public use, this little beach area.
Yeah.
The grantor of that, I guess who's no longer living in that area, I thought part of the agreement was to put steps into the wall so people could walk down more conveniently from the lower wharf itself to that sandy beach area. But those steps are not there. So whether that's a risk of some sort, I raised that as a question, whether that should be addressed.
Sam, do you? Yeah, go ahead.
In the transfer of the property, that's a question for Libby McKinney. I would ask. I just think that
when the commission was considering its comment letter to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance.
It was also to the RTM, to everyone, because the RTM had to approve the transfer of the property. We were, and I don't have the letter here, but we assumed, because the presentation that we received from from Race, which represented the owners of the property, was that the owner was going to build those steps. And so we commented as a condition of the transfer. And so we voted on and commented, assuming that those steps were going to be in place, so that people wouldn't be tripping and stumbling all over the riprap down there. And the other part of the letter was to confirm that the Harbor Commission would be responsible for that small beach area, which would seem logical that it would happen because it's adjoining the lower wharf, which the commission is responsible for. So if somebody is injured, or if there is a problem on that little beach area, is the Harbor Commission directly involved? And well, anyway, those are questions we never got an answer to about the town attorney.
Yeah, and it's all good questions, but is the current and new owner responsible or have the financial wherewithal to put the steps in? Because there was no lien against the property to put steps into the beach, I'm sure, and there's nothing or paper trail from that perspective. So who puts them in, and the determination of that it was something that the town wanted, and or all the regulatory bodies that were involved in the whole process. Someone's going to have to build steps, right?
Right, and I guess my point is, not only did the town want them, but the representation from the owner was that they would build them.
Yeah, but they live in another state now.
Right.
And
but
I don't. Was it a condition of the sale of the property of any sort of? I don't know. That's why I say it.
Yeah. Does that representation follow the land? Is really the question.
Correct.
So
we brought this up to the Assistant Public Works Director when we had the meeting, Tim, that we attended, and he seemed to think this was a question that was worthy to pursue, and he sort of didn't think that the issue of building the hedge to block the view was as urgent to pursue. But the steps had a public safety
component.
Where are the steps, Jeff?
Pardon me?
Where are the steps?
They're
Where
not.
should they be?
Well,
Where
it's
should they be?
supposed to be in the lower wharf.
Where that
down.
little wall is now, you
That
step
little wall,
over.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any questions for Sam? Any thoughts, any additional thoughts? Great, thanks, Sam. New business, we will be having to submit a budget request to the town, in a couple of months. And I guess one of the questions for us to consider is whether or not we want to pay a deputy harbor master and how much. And because we come pretty close to our, using all of the resources that are, allocated to us by the RTM. So if we were to undertake to have a deputy harbor master, we would have, and we wanted to pay him, we would have to increase our request to the RTM. So it's open for discussion.
We discussed that, I think, when we last connected at the harbor. So I guess the first question, what would be the cost? What would be the pay to the, so there's nothing allocated right now?
Correct, there's nothing, because we've never had a deputy harbor master. So we have no history. We're starting from scratch.
In fact, what we pay our current harbor master is worth its weight in gold. We know that.
Well, that's true. And we could also argue that should be raised, but that's...
Indeed.
Right.
So I guess the question is, what is the scope of work? And I think that's what we discussed before. What would be the scope of work? And I think as we discussed, Mr. Harbor Master, there's not really a lot that the deputy would do apart from fill in for you, should that person need to do so. That's my understanding.
Basically, yeah, I think it would be I think the goal is if something ever happened to me, short term or permanent, you needed someone who could step in and had the authority under the statutes to do what I do, to issue mooring permits, et cetera. But I don't think I would use the person or need the person, frankly, for the issuance of permits now in the management. It's on software on my laptop I carry around with me. It's not that unwieldy. It's actually once you get the hang of the software, it's fine. I suppose that if I was unavailable, like yesterday, if something came up and I was out of the country and no one can reach me for whatever reason, it's wishful thinking, I guess, and there's a boat speeding in the harbor, someone can call the deputy, who then had the authority technically to, order the person to stop or to... But we do have a Fairfield Marine unit, police unit, if we need it, and they've assisted, like this spring when we had the trouble with the speeding boat, they assisted me in tracking that person down and stopping it. So it's not like it's, we don't have a marine police unit. Some towns, the harbor masters are a little different. They're police officers, and that's where their boating, their police come from, their marine police.
We don't have...
We know they're not part of the harbor master.
Oh, correct. Right.
Separate. We have a
yes.
great marine police, but that's a separate...
Oh, so sometimes they're part of the harbor, they're under the harbor.
You can have a harbor master who's a police officer, for instance. Might be a little bit different in the structure. We don't in this town.
Got it.
But the thing that nobody can do but the harbor master is station boats.
Right.
And so if something were to happen to the harbor master for any time between January and April,
right,
we've got nobody who's going to have a boat in the harbor, period.
There's someone, like I said, I'm unavailable, long-term, short-term. I can't finish issuing the moorings. I have to order a boat moved because it's on the wrong mooring. Like last year was an issue. There was, one gentleman was just talking to me 2 weeks ago about his lamenting over the problem with someone unauthorized being on his mooring for most of last season. But with no harbor master, because I wasn't appointed to the fall, the commission doesn't have the authority, the club doesn't have the authority, Jeff doesn't have the authority to move him.
Only the harbor master.
Only the harbor master.
Got it.
So that's why you need someone in case, God forbid, something happens.
Got it.
Come in and do this.
That's somebody on deck, ready to go.
On deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
go ahead, Sam.
If they're going to the RTM with our budget and looking for another FTE, for the town, I leave it to Bill and Eric their thoughts about at budget time and how contentious it gets, where there seems to be fights over people in the HR department and such in different departments when education needs a bump, and et cetera, et cetera. I just bring it up that it creates a lot of drama when you're looking for a new employee. I'm just throwing it out to the group, as long as we manage it through our budget. because that goes, I don't know, do you guys have an opinion, Bill or Eric?
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think I know where you're going, and that was essentially the discussion that the harbor master and I had a few weeks ago. I mean, that's a very tough ask in this climate. It's a really, really tall ask, especially since, and again, I get the need for somebody to be on deck and step in, but if there's really nothing for them to do until that opportunity arises, that's a big ask in this financial climate.
Right. It is a big ask. Maybe it's a volunteer position. Maybe there is a group of deputies that we can call on in town that are, retired, and I don't know. I hate to just throw that out there, but I just think in the budget process, it puts us in a whole different world of negotiation with the town.
I agree, Sam, wholeheartedly.
Well, then, if we have a deputy and we need to pay him something, do we pay him from the mooring fee account?
Well, I guess, Kim, this is Doug. I would ask this question. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
We've been functioning without a deputy harbor master, and we've identified the need for one. But the need, as we've identified it, is really to backstop the harbor master in the event the harbor master is either incapacitated or unavailable. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't really sound like a full-time job or anything else. I would say, why couldn't we designate somebody in a volunteer capacity, either a member of the commission or somebody who's not on the commission, whatever the rules would provide for, to serve as a deputy in that position. Presumably, they could become a successor or not. But this is really a mitigation role.
Right, but the complication, Doug, is that the person has to be appointed by the governor, that the members of the Harbor Commission cannot be harbor master. And we found that out when our last harbor master departed in June, is we had the whole summer where decisions had to be made, but nobody could make them. And luckily we have the assistance of Pequot, so we had a lot of safety related decisions that had to be made that were being made by Jeff Engborg and his staff. But when it comes to stationing boats, it has to be somebody appointed by the governor, and we can only tell the governor who we think might be a good candidate, and the governor will then be the one who makes the decision.
And that, but can't we recommend a volunteer?
We don't have yet.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. We don't have to pay a salary, but I'm simply asking because we have budget is in our near future, and if we wanted to commit any money, whether it's $100 a month or $100 every quarter, or 50 cents for I don't know what, we have to think about that now begin to think about it now, because we have to prepare our budget for 23, 24.
We'll know when we talk to the candidates. The ones I've spoken to, I've indicated is most likely no salary. And just so you know, my salary is not really a salary. Someone used FTE. I'm a 1099 contractor to the town. So the commission pays me $695 a month, which then I have to treat as miscellaneous income and deal with that on my taxes and pay all my taxes and my federal share on that. So really, even in my position, you can't do this. You can't look at this like a job, because I clearly spend that just on things. Whether it's this past weekend, I got myself a nice new boat hook for the boat, bullhorn, and a Harbor Master crash bag, waterproof bag to put the first aid kit I've got to buy into, and the little stuff you need if you're going to do this right. If you're going to be the harbor, you've got to do. So it just covers expenses more than anything, frankly, that you have. So you can't look at it like it's you're doing this to make money. This isn't working at Home Depot on the side for more money.
Right. Certainly that's the reason.
And that's why I'm community service.
Then we go to the state, right? If you're an independent contractor in a 1099, we go to the state. But then what does that mean? Does that mean every town gets a deputy as well, or do they? Is there precedent here?
Well, they could, but the state doesn't. The state pays me a little less than $1,000 for the entire year. I think it's $900 a year I get
Right.
as the state harbor master. Again, it's a 1099 employee, which you cut it in half
Right.
after you do your taxes. So we can have a deputy harbor master. We don't have to, and towns don't have to pay. Some towns pay their harbor master, police officer's salary because it's a full-time position with, they give them a harbor master vessel and the whole thing. Other towns treat it like we do, more of a volunteer position with a small stipend. So
Right.
there's no rules. No.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not asking for a final decision tonight. I just, again, we've got a budget coming up, and Sam did so well last year on making sure that our budget was approved as submitted without any additional time or commitment by any of the commission members. I just would like to be sure that we're all on the same page when we think about what we're going to be requesting from the town bodies. And Jeff Stedman.
It's very clear that the statute, when it refers to the mooring fee or any other fee, the only fee collected shall be deposited into a fund maintained by the municipality for the maintenance and improvement of the harbor for the public and for expenses for personnel and equipment directly related to the function of the commission and the harbor master or deputy harbor master. So the mooring fees are
By statute, the mooring fees could be used to support a deputy harbor master. But again, we have the question that it's, what do we want to do? That's what the statute, so it bears discussion and thinking about.
Yeah.
And since we're still in the interview stage, I mean, we don't have to make a decision. I think it's important to be thinking along the lines of,
Sure.
how do we want to encourage this person to continue to be interested, even if they're not doing much?
I think we want to look for somebody like our harbor master, who's not doing it for the money. It's community service. It's to be an ambassador for Southport Harbor. I mean, certainly for a lot of people in government, and we do these things. We're not doing this for money. So if somebody is motivated by making money, then that's the wrong person for the position.
Right.
And clearly, there's not going to be much to pay. If any, I do agree with Sam's point. I think it's a tall ask to go to the RTM for more resources, especially in this climate, and in view of the fact that the deputy harbor master certainly does not have a lot to do but be on deck and ready to go.
That's going to be the first question. Someone who's been on the RTM for years is, you want to double your staffing. Why? And they're going to ask you, how do you have a particular pay? You're going to have to explain why you need to put someone else on salary.
Right.
So that's something you have to be prepared for with your budget.
I like the idea of this being a voluntary position. And it seems like a sensible suggestion to look to the commission, but that's not possible based upon statute, correct? Even though it's appointed by the governor, the commission's off.
We cannot.
Got it.
We cannot.
There's no, yes, you can recommend, and the governor will most likely appoint the recommended candidate, but has no official authority or as a deputy or a state harbor master unless he or she is appointed by the governor.
But it's got to be independent of the commissioners, is what you're saying. So let's say we appoint, Mr. Hirschler. Could he be the deputy harbor master?
The governor's representatives told us specifically that he could not be a member of the harbor
Got
commission.
it, got it.
We are not eligible.
So the commission, to answer the question posed, commission's ineligible for that.
Remember, the harbor master and the deputy harbor master are state officials. They have a role with the harbor management plan because of the statute that makes that role. But they're responsible to the Commissioner of Energy and Environmental Protection now. It's not municipal officials, it's state officials.
So one cannot occupy both roles.
Commission and deputy harbor master?
Yeah.
Correct.
So, commissioners, any additional comments, thoughts about pay, deputy harbor master, where the money would come from if we decide to pay? Any strong feelings seems to be, we want this position to be a volunteer?
I think so. I think it's a tall ask to go to the RTM and ask for more money for this role in light of what we just discussed. I think we're going to select for a person that wants to give back to the community and is motivated to move in this role for other reasons apart from what the stipend will be.
Okay. We could use the mooring fee money, should that become an issue.
You can do it in the future if it becomes an issue.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
No one wants to do this. Yeah, you always have that option.
Right.
Because there's little.
Derek, I was just wondering.
Yes. Hello.
If we need, so to get someone to commit, I mean, would we be the ones to write the, make an amendment to any description so that we could, let's just say, if indeed a deputy had to step in for a period of time, that deputy would be reimbursed whatever amount, whether it's something for the period of time that they had to cover, whether it's $10 or $1,000, whatever it is. Is that something that we would want to commit to, and then if that were to happen, we're able to draw those funds from an escrow account from somewhere?
Well, we have control over the mooring fee account, Eric. And the mooring fee account, by state statute, can be used for maintenance of the harbor, for personnel who maintain the harbor, for any purpose that benefits the harbor.
Including specifically by statute, harbor master and harbor master expenses.
Right.
So you do have the ability to go into that if necessary.
So the commission could, if something happened to Brian and we had a deputy harbor master who served in his job for 3 months, we could decide that the payment that Brian got would be pulled from the mooring fee account and given to the deputy harbor master. But that would be we would have to make that decision. The commission would have to make that decision.
And that's a good point that Eric makes.
Yeah.
I mean, so we've agreed that there's little for the deputy harbor master to do apart from being ready, willing, and able to fulfill the role of the harbor master. Should he or she do that, would he or she then take on the role of harbor master? They wouldn't, but they would just fill in, and certainly they should be compensated appropriately if that would indeed be the case. So I think Eric brings up a great point.
Right.
And then that way you don't have to. Then you don't have to allocate any money for a budget.
We could do that. That wouldn't go to the RTM. The commission could do that from its mooring fee account.
All right. Okay. I guess that's one way around not having to ask for more money.
Right. And the deputy harbor master could not become the harbor master without that appointment would have to be made by the governor. So we would have to start from square one again. So we're not hiring somebody who could be harbor master. We're hiring somebody to be a deputy harbor master, period.
It's not a Prince Charles who's just...
Correct.
Right. So they would So they would step in and
the work.
Right. And then the search, then we would still select for a harbor master.
Correct.
But there would be no rush in the event I step down. Maybe
Right.
you have someone who can do the duties in my absence.
Right.
So you could spend a year, whatever, searching if you wanted to find a person.
But the issue is by state statute, we need somebody in the absence of.
If I can't do it, no one can.
Nobody could do it.
You have to get, I suppose, another town's harbor master to
Well,
come
that
in
was the
and do it.
issue. We would not have been able to issue mooring permits.
I just talked about that with another town that, what happens when you lose your harbor master? Does one of us have to come in as a harbor master and,
We never talked about that with the governor, whether a harbor master in another town could step in. That's an interesting.
I think because under your authority, you have jurisdiction in all of the harbors in Connecticut.
Is that right?
I don't think
As
so.
harbor master.
Because what does the letter of appointment say?
You're appointed as harbor master for those two harbors, correct?
Yes.
But then the statutes say, when you have your law enforcement powers, it doesn't limit you to your harbors. It says harbor masters can enforce, like, say, certain safe boating. It's an interesting discussion the Attorney General would have to weigh in on.
And what are the two harbors?
Actually, it's one harbor. I'm harbor master for Southport Harbor, but this time the governor made me harbor master for Fairfield, the town of Fairfield.
Conceivably like South.
Well, South Benson's a private anchorage, so not South Benson, but everything from Ash Creek on the western shore, all along the Fairfield coast, up the creek, Pine Creek, and back, and then up, as far as I can go into the harbor, because Deep doesn't have any vessels on the Western Sound, so they have no way of enforcing moorings, checking moorings, or making sure there's illegal docks that just suddenly appear at someone's house. The Deep asked the governor to make me so now I have to check everything in town.
So South Benson is private because that's under the office of the
town.
town.
So I have no,
You're federal.
I don't have to assign those.
Or state.
I don't have to assign those because South Benson's not it's not a navigable like our
You
harbor.
don't assign the votes, but if there was an issue that required, say, removal of an
Correct.
abandoned boat or other things that were subject to
That's
harbor
right.
master's authority, your authority could be applied there.
Deep had me down there at midnight one night, about a month or so ago, because there was a report of a vessel leaking fuel into the harbor.
At South Benson.
At South Benson. So I got called to go down there with Deep, so if and when they found the exact vessel, I can order the vessel out of the water immediately, or then allow them to board the vessel and take action. So I walked the entire dock with flashlights with the authorities looking for the...
We didn't pay you time and a half.
Unfortunately.
Another question is relevant. How many harbor masters are there in the state of Connecticut? How many are appointed by the governor?
They're all appointed by the
But how many are there?
I have the number, I have to check on.
Less than...
50?
Oh, no, how many?
There's a lot of harbor masters.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
because there are towns that have harbor masters that don't have harbor management plans.
Right.
We go up the Connecticut River, and there are towns that have harbor masters.
Wow.
So just every coastal town has a harbor master.
So did you say 50? 50?
No, there are,
A lot.
I think there are 30-something coastal towns, some 38,
Something like that,
something like that. So there's over 30 harbor masters.
Okay.
And then there's deputies that are also.
Right, you have Westport and Norwalk, just go down the West, all the towns have Bridgeport,
Yeah.
Stratford.
Stanford has a harbor master and a deputy.
Like Westport, so that would be like private though, right?
Yeah.
Westport.
Oh, because they're coastal, but...
They may not have a harbor like we
Right.
do, that I have to do moorings. That may not be something they have, because I suppose Longshore is probably private.
Private, right.
By the town, but you still have, the river, you have the Saugatuck, where people are mooring boats, that
Okay.
harbor master make sure that they're safe moorings and knows whose boats they are. And if someone puts a dock in illegally, we have to notify Deep that what's up with this dock that just got constructed in the river without a permit.
Got
I
it.
believe
Got
every
it.
coastal town has a harbor master.
Interesting.
Yeah, whether they have a harbor management plan or not, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
I have a map that shows that, I
Yeah.
should share it.
No, great to know. Thank
We
you.
haven't had a meeting since I was appointed last year. They haven't done a meeting this year because of COVID. I think they used to have annual meetings of everyone, so you can meet everyone and chat,
Fantastic.
but they haven't done that yet.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, any other new business? Commissioners? Any member of the public like to, oh, wait, Jeff? Jeff has new business.
I have the appellate court's decision, which was issued last week in the matter of Susan Cohen versus Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And this is the case that emanated in Greenwich, that went to the Superior Court and transferred from Stanford. And the Superior Court judge, among other things, ruled that a Harbor Management Commission has no authority to review or to comment on matters of DEEP permits, and that a Harbor Commission's recommendations have no weight unless there's a recommendation that's already specified in the plan. So it's quite a troubling decision, and the appellate court upheld that. On a more minor point, it's interesting, they also confirmed that to build a dock, an applicant doesn't have to have the dock attached to his or her property. It can begin waterward of the mean high water line. And of course, that has relevance to what we're dealing with on Kensington Point, with all those 5 subdivided properties on the water. And it was understood that none of them could have docks because nothing could be placed in the conservation restriction area. But that restriction area only goes to the mean high water. So sort of a clever engineering approach as long as the dock, but that's less significant than the impact of the decision on Harbor Management Commission authority. And I don't know how, I believe the town of Greenwich is going to, the Harbor Commission meets tomorrow night, and there was discussion about whether this would be appealed to the Supreme Court, because the Harbor Commission in Greenwich was also, so how to proceed with this and whether it's appropriate to now talk with legislators for some sort of a clarification of the statute to make clear that the Harbor Commission's recommendations have to be considered by DEEP. Maybe they're not binding, but they're certainly more than just public comments. That's my report, and we'll talk about it later, I guess.
So commissioners, any thoughts, any comment about the Cohen decision? I'll just remind us all that when the original decision came out by the Superior Court, this commission voted to do whatever it took to support the effort to maintain the Harbor Commission's authority to be heard by DEEP. And Jeff and I met briefly with state legislators, and I think that we want to again proceed to meet with state legislators in the hope that there could be perhaps an amendment to the law so that the Harbor Commission comments too DEEP for local projects would be taken into account, which, according to the Cohen decision, is not necessarily going to happen anymore.
Well, this decision was recently used against the Norwalk Harbor Commission in the public hearing process for the replacement of the railroad bridge. And the hearing officer said that the commission's comments were submitted, but they, pursuant to this case, to the Superior Court judge's decision, they would have no special standing, and they'd be considered only as public comments, which I think is an issue. But we'll figure out how to deal with it, I guess.
So, troubling decision. Bill, you have a question?
Yeah, no, it's just, so essentially taking control away or power away from the local harbor management commission, essentially the implication, is that correct?
Yeah, the issue is that there's a section in the existing statute now that talks about recommendations of the Harbor Commission, recommendations pursuant to the harbor management plan being binding on DEEP. And they're not, and then it goes on to say unless DEEP shows cause otherwise. So it was never a question of DEEP power. It was because DEEP could always do something different if they showed the reason why. So there was an argument between what does that mean? Does that mean it's a recommendation that's spelled out ahead of time in the harbor management plan, or it's a recommendation that the commission develops when looking at a specific project and relating it to the policies of the plan? So this was a discussion for years, and then with the Greenwich Harbor Management Plan and several other plans subsequent to that, DEEP agreed that that it would be a recommendation of the Harbor Management Commission that was based on the policies of the plan and supported by the plan. In the court case, it went backwards. It didn't acknowledge that DEEP had already approved this in the plan. It only looked at the statute and interpreted that as meaning it has to be a recommendation that's spelled out ahead of time in the plan, which I don't think really makes a whole lot of sense because you can't. And the example in Greenwich was interesting because the Harbor Commission in Greenwich, with respect to the dock that didn't attach to the land, which was proposed that way to avoid having to comply with the zoning regulations that said you couldn't have a dock on property that didn't have a principal use. So the Harbor Commission's comment was they couldn't make a favorable recommendation without knowing what DEEP's policy is with respect to docks that don't attach to the land. DEEP didn't address that and said they didn't have to, because there's nothing in the Harbor Management Plan in Greenwich that talks about docks that don't attach to the land. But it was a reasonable question to ask. And then that's where we are, so.
Right. And so the plan update committee is going to be meeting again in a week or so, and I guess one of the things we're going to think about is whether or not we put everything that we can possibly think we might ever want to talk about in the plan.
That's just,
and it's crazy, but I mean, how do you get there?
Or we argue that what was approved in Greenwich, the exact same language, and was approved in East Lyme and West Haven subsequent to that, and then see what DEEP says. They won't approve it, but
right.
Well, anyway,
so it's troubling.
It is troubling.
It's very troubling. Commissioners, any comment? Okay, any public comment?
If I may, Madam Chair, the Lower Wharf situation.
Yes.
You may have trouble finding someone to put in the stairs, but among all the papers generated, I think there was something that said that the shrubbery that would be planted or would exist on that corner, southwest corner of Harbor Road into the rocks should not be more than 3 or 4 feet high. And if you've been down there lately, not you specifically, Madam Chairman, but there is about a 7, maybe an 8-foot fence of tight shrubbery that completely blocks the southwest view of Southport Harbor, the shoreline, Southport Beach, and the coastline down in Westport. And the other thing, Madam Chairman, is that I'm a fisherman, and I know that other fishermen know that the lower wharf is not used extensively these days, but believe me, if bluefish and bass come into Southport Harbor, there'll be standing room only on that lower wharf. So, if it's something on a plate in front of us, that if we can get on with it and just make that lower wharf or the dock a little bit more suitable for fishermen to use, and work on the wall, it might save some work in the future, because the longer we wait to do something there, the more difficult it's going to be to repair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Pat, and I agree those shrubs are more than 3 feet high. And I'm not quite sure where we go with that, but you're absolutely right. They are high and they do block the view. Any other public comment? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kim, that's historic. I would go to on that. And there's new owners, so hopefully they will understand the situation.
Right, because it's in the deed, Sam. It says no more than 3 feet high. So.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome, Pat.
Okay.
Here we go.
Any other comments? Any other thoughts? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Bill's moved. Can I have a second? I need somebody on the phone.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you, everyone. See you in
Good night,
November.
all.